There is a lot to look forward to in Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Black Widow is getting a solo flick, Spider-Man 3 might be giving us a live-action Spider-Verse, and the fourth Thor film, Thor: Love and Thunder, is going to be powering up Natalie Portman's Jane Foster, turning her into the mighty Thor. But you know, that's not the only thing that movie is giving us. It's also going to introduce moviegoers to a new villain, one played by Christian Bale, who may just mean nasty things are in store for the God of Thunder. Because Thor 4 is going to introduce to the MCU, Gorr, the God Butcher. But who is Gorr, and what could we possibly expect from him in the upcoming movie? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about. In this video, I'm going to take a look at Gorr's comic origins and how that might translate over to the big screen. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Now, before we get into what Gorr's role could be in the film, we should probably take a look at who exactly Gorr was in the comics. That way, we can have a bit of a foundation of knowledge to build upon. Gorr was introduced in the second issue of Thor: God of Thunder back in 2012. He started out as a rather innocent being, born on some unnamed planet out in the far reaches of the galaxy. From a young age, Gorr was taught by everyone around him that he should have absolute faith and trust in the gods. However, when a series of extremely devastating events, including the death of his entire family, drove him to question the gods, he was exiled by his people, driven out from everything that he had ever known. It was then that Gorr came upon a fallen elder god named Null, who wielded a twisted, black blade known as All Black the Necro Sword. Enraged by the fact that gods did exist after all, and seeing this being laying before him pathetically, Gorr took up All Black and struck Null down. It was then that Gorr bonded with the blade, which was later revealed to be the first symbiote, you know, what Venom is. More on the implications of that later. And he became the God Butcher, taking an oath to hunt down and destroy all gods and godlike beings. Over many millennia, Gorr traveled the cosmos, slaying numerous gods, including quite a few here on Earth. In fact, it was on Earth where Gorr first encountered Thor, nearly killing him and attempting to torture the, at the time, young god, hoping to gain the location of Asgard so that he could go and wipe them out himself. After that, Thor had a few interactions with Gorr, all of which ended in pretty substantial fights, including one where 3 different versions of Thor face off with him. And this particular fight almost ended with Gorr killing the older King Thor, but ultimately Gorr was the one who lost his life here. But of course you know how comics go, as he came back later, allowing him to continue pursuing and eliminating gods all across the stars. So yeah, he isn't exactly the most friendly fellow. Kinda doubt Thor will be able to bust out some of his Norse charm to talk the dude down. So now let's try to figure out how things could potentially play out in the fourth Thor film, based upon not only what we know about the movie, but this information about Gorr in the comics. Now obviously Marvel doesn't always stick super closely to the comics for films within the MCU, so you know, things might wind up being nothing like what we got in the comics. But in the absence of any conflicting info, what we have is sufficient for some relatively wild speculation. See, Endgame left Thor in kind of an interesting situation. No longer the king of Asgard, he had chosen to travel with the Guardians of the Galaxy, hoping to find out who it is that he wanted to be out among the stars. And that is where the film starts, with Thor on the ship, traveling around. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jane is probably doing some sciencey stuff, when all of a sudden, Gorr attacks her, as he's trying to find information on Thor's whereabouts. Obviously, Jane doesn't know, since the pair split sometime before the last Thor film. But Gorr takes her with him anyways, figuring that she could be good bait to lure the god out into the open. Thor, hearing about the fact that Jane was taken, springs into action, hunting down Gorr. Upon first encountering the God Butcher, Thor barely manages to escape with his life, as Gorr is wielding All Black the Necro Sword, a weapon of serious power. Figuring that he needs something to help him defeat Gorr, Thor travels to meet up with Atrig, who reforges Mjolnir. Now wielding both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, Thor steps up once again. And this is where things get kinda interesting, as it would probably make for a more dramatic film to have Thor perish here, with Jane picking up Mjolnir to finish what he started. However, Chris Hemsworth has said that this won't be his last film as Thor, so that's probably not what's gonna happen. Instead, Jane will still pick up Mjolnir, and the two will team up to destroy Gorr, as the power of 2 godlike beings will prove to be too much for even Gorr. And at the end of it all, the Necro Sword will slink away, setting the stage for the introduction of symbiotes into the MCU. Okay, so that last part might not actually happen since, you know, Sony, but a guy can dream, can he? So will this be how Thor Love and Thunder will play out? Maybe, maybe not. Either way, Thor is sure to have his hands full once Gore the God Butcher hits the scene.